I suppose humans have been dreaming for as long as they have existed. We must assume this as so many people have experienced a dream, even other animals dream. It is something we as people have just accepted for what it is, just a part of life. But is there something more to it? A dream is defined as a series of thoughts, images and sensations occurring in a person's mind during sleep. Sounds simple enough, but once you enter the rabbit hole, you'll find a lot of different interpretation that will leave you more confused than when you started. The word dream has pretty much maintained relevance since its conception, but has only become a more common word in the last 20 years due to cultural shifts into things like the American dream, dreams coming true, social media influence and marketing, which evokes a big dream idea. That's not what we are looking at today. Ancient civilizations, like Egypt for example, believed that dreams were not a psychological phenomenon, but an objective experience, seen as a crossroad between this life and the next, a medium to communicate with gods, devils, the dead, and those who had been condemned. There is obviously not a lot of preserved evidence from thousands of years ago, but the surviving writings and engravings support this idea. One seemingly troubled woman wrote, "I beg you to let go of the anguish in my body as I see the person who has passed away fight for me in a dream." I think the Egyptians took what they saw in dreams more seriously due to the ideas surrounding dreams back then, which probably caused a downward spiral for the people more than anything else. The Greeks, however, believed a dream to them was a future-telling source, evidence that the gods existed, or the revelation that there was another world unknown to man but just as real as the world they lived in. Homer, author of the Iliad and the Odyssey, was influential in the discussion of dreams. Dreams in his work would vary from omens or prophecies, warnings or messages from the gods, reflections of human anxiety and desire, as well as illusions or evil deceptions. He used them in his literary work as a topic and an inspiration, as he believed that nocturnal apparitions inspire epic action. A man finds himself in the upper floor of a large multi-storied house. The room is well furnished, elegantly designed with a deep reflection of modern culture. He moves down to the ground floor to find what looks to be an older section of the house, more traditional furnishings with a less sophisticated style. It felt nostalgic. He had some kind of emotional connection to it. He moved down to the basement. It was older, rustic, and constructed of stone primarily. It was almost primitive, like something his ancestor would have lived in. Finally going down once more to what could only be described as a cave, devoid of anything modern, floor made of stone, resembling some kind of tomb. The man woke up and journaled his dream. He realized that what he had just experienced had a much deeper meaning to it. His name was Carl Jung, regarded as one of the most influential in the world of psychology, literature, philosophy, and plenty more. He had essentially just decrypted his own dream. He states that each level of the house represented a different part of the human psyche, and houses being a symbol of that. Upper floors pertained to the conscious mind, representing ego, conscious awareness, which is influenced by lived experience in culture, education, and modern society. Ground floors represented the personal unconscious, containing repressed memories, unresolved conflicts, and personal experiences, closely tied to individual history and personal life. Basements represent a deeper unconscious, tapping into primitive aspects of the mind, like instincts and ancestral memories, which is the idea that certain memories, traits, and knowledge can be handed down from one generation to the next through genetic mechanisms. Carl Jung believed dreams are a bridge between the conscious and unconscious, leading to a better understanding of the self and aiding personal growth. The collective unconscious and archetypes, where part of the unconscious mind is shared and copied into all humans, seeing the shadow, anima or animus, and the wise old man. This theory is simply proven by people experiencing these same archetypes in their dream. It is likely to be a different type of that archetype due to people's visualization of that archetype. You could also argue that some people only saw this because they knew of this phenomenon before. We also have dream symbols. These can be disguised wishes with multiple layers of meaning, reflecting personal, cultural, or universal themes and ideas. And finally, compensatory function, the idea that dreams will act to physiologically balance you. For example, if someone is very rational, their dreams may be more irrational or emotional to balance conscious attitudes and behaviors. His method of interpreting dreams, amplification, involves interpreting dreams by connecting them to a religion, myth, culture, and also uncover a broader meaning to a dream, as well as their relation to the individual and collective consciousness. There's no way I would get through this video without talking about this man. His psychoanalytic book on the interpretation of dreams, made in 1889, is a staple part of early psychology in terms of understanding child development and the original scientific theories associated with dreams. His key dream concepts include that dreams are wish fulfillment, desires that can be experienced without constraint of societal expectations. The unconscious mind works on a different logic. There are two parts to a dream: manifest content, which is what we remember about the dream, and latent content, which is the hidden meaning of the dream, often thoughts, emotions, and unconscious desires. He introduced the concept of dream work, essentially how a dream is produced. Condensation, multiple ideas that are combined into a single image or event, essentially simplifying a complex thought. Displacement, emotional significance is transferred from objects or ideas into less significant ones, making the meaning of the dream far less obvious. Symbolization, hidden thoughts or desires are hidden by symbols which require some form of interpretation to understand them. And finally, secondary revision, where the mind reorganizes the dream to make it more comprehensible to the dreamer. He categorized types of dreams: direct wish fulfillment, anxiety dreams, which involve repressed fears or unresolved conflict, and punishment dreams, reflecting a sense of guilt, often related to moral conflicts. One of Freud's patients, Sergei Pankiev, aka the Wolfman, was a Russian aristocrat with mental and physical health issues who had a dream where he was laid in bed when he looked out of the window and noticed 6 or 7 white wolves sat in a tree outside. The wolves, which had tails that did not match their bodies, were watching him in his room. Freud linked this dream to a story which Wolfman's grandfather had told him, in which a fox named Renard lost his tail whilst using it as bait for fishing. He believed that Wolfman suffered from castration anxiety, which explains the fox-like tails of the wolves in the dream. Also, his fear of caterpillars, which he used to dissect when he was younger. Also, the man had witnessed his father chopping a snake into pieces, which Freud believed had contributed to this anxiety. There are many other cases to note, like Little Hands and the Rat Man, but they have less dream theory involved, so I'm kind of just going to leave them for this video. For Freud to interpret dreams, he used a method called free association, where he would let the dreamer freely describe thoughts of the dream. His work has been credited as groundbreaking, but he has faced criticism due to the heavy emphasis of sexual subject matter and symbolism, as well as being a very subjective approach to dream interpretation. Freud and Jung are some of our earliest key scientific thinkers on dream theory. They both looked into symbolic links and ways dreams connect into our waking lives, but you could say that Freud focused on the dark side and Jung focused on the light side, where Freud would look at dreams as repressed desires and conflicts, whereas Jung saw them for personal growth, with existential and spiritual themes. Either way we look at it, they are both not entirely valid in their dream work, working almost entirely off interpretation. But unluckily for them, and luckily for us, a lot can happen in the years to come. REM sleep was discovered in 1953 by Eugene Azarinsky and Nathaniel Kleitman, discovering that REM sleep has a positive correlation to vivid dreaming, providing a biological link as to why we dream. Neuroscientists post-1950s used EEGs and later MRIs and PET scans to study brain activity during sleep, allowing for brainwave patterns to be examined, like specific brain regions during sleep stages, and researchers found REM sleep has high activity in the limbic system, which deals with emotions and memory, and much lower activity in the prefrontal cortex, which deals with logic and rational thought. explaining the emotional and illogical nature to the dreams we often experience. J. Allen Hobson and Robert McCarley produced the activation synthesis theory, which was the idea that dreams are the result of the mind trying to make sense of the random neural activity during REM sleep, once again shifting the focus from interpretation to biological explanations. There are two additional theories under AST. Memory consolidation, where dreams play a role in processing and consolidating memories, as well as regulating emotions and aiding learning. And threat simulation, where dreams simulate real-world threats, which allows us to practice in a safe environment. The study of lucid dreams has gained significant scientific validation in recent time. Researchers like Stephen LaBarge used eye movement signals from lucid dreamers to communicate from within their dreams. Devices would have LEDs positioned over the eyes. They would flash when the dreamer had entered REM sleep. This allowed the dreamer to see this light and understand that they were in a dream without waking them up, increasing the likelihood of controlling dreams and lucid dreaming. Remember Freud's Wolfman dream? Some would call it troubling or scary. They would be right, because that was no dream. It was a nightmare. The scientific explanation can be linked directly to activity in parts of the brain. The amygdala, the brain structure responsible for processing emotions, particularly fear, is in a hyperactive state during REM sleep, which contributes to the emotional intensity of nightmares. The hippocampus helps memory consolidation. Its activity in REM sleep may explain the real-life emotional experiences, memories, or fears in our dream content. And the prefrontal cortex is much more inactive during REM sleep, meaning your ability to think logically, reason, and self-control is largely hindered, allowing for much more irrational content to emerge in dreams, making them more disorientating and disturbing. There is a form of nightmares that I feel so lucky to have never experienced. One that taps into fight or flight, but you can't activate either. This is sleep paralysis. The phenomenon of not being able to move whilst the Hat Man or some demon walks around your room and torments you for however long it lasts, supposedly caused by stress and a lack of sleep, may just motivate you enough to get that extra hour of sleep. Nightmares can take a toll on mental and physical health, which technically makes them a danger to ourselves, even though it's all inside our head. After all, the continuity hypothesis tells us that our waking memories, emotional issues, and life stresses are incorporated in our dreams, which gives a reason for nightmares' objective existence, but also gives us a reason to believe that they are necessary, for they highlight attention to what we need to work on in our waking life. In fact, in most cases, you can't stop thinking about them, allowing us to ponder, process, and work through daily experiences and yourself. The big screen has shown us many iconic dream sequences, some to provide an alternative way of understanding a character by showing desires, fears, warnings, and understanding of the self. Terry Gilliam's dystopian satire Brazil, released in 1985, saw Sam's character flying with angelic wings through an industrial landscape, revealing a deep desire to be free and be detached from the oppressive reality in which he was a part of in his waking existence. It's a film I really enjoyed watching, but its use of dreams was simple and was essentially just used to represent his thoughts in a very literal and easily decipherable way. The man I really want to talk about, a true genius in the filmmaking world and a visionary of using dream sequences as a medium, is no other than the David Lynch. His dream sequences, seen most famously in Mulholland Drive and Twin Peaks, are somewhat more realistic in their style, blurring reality and imagination, being somewhat unsettling as well as disjointed. In most cases, they are not expected to make total sense to the viewer, and more invoke a feeling that something is coming, which may be due to that only the dreamer can make sense of their own dreams. Picking up on cues that will only make sense to them as it is the amalgamation of their own life experiences and depths of the mind, almost impossible to interpret as an outsider. For example, the dream sequences in Twin Peaks sees Cooper's character sat in a waiting room, which alludes to the anticipation that something is coming. He is also an older version of himself in his dreams, which we could see as a wiser version of himself coming to warn him, or make the waking version of Cooper aware of his knowledge and having a higher understanding. The red curtained room has a few different meanings to it. Firstly, red is the colour of anger, inner passion, blood, but the curtains themselves stopping anything from the outside looking in. At the point of recording this, I'm still yet to finish the entirety of Twin Peaks, but I have seen the main plot unfold, and more specifically the dream content within the show. I absolutely loved how when the dream was revisited over and over again, Cooper would eventually work out what was going on. The gum you like is going to come back in style quote, relating to the old man we rarely see and his vital moment in helping Cooper figure out the killer. The dancing dwarf, relating to Leland Palmer's descent into madness whilst the killer Bob spirit has taken over him. Laura's kiss, almost like a final, desperate cry for help, as she could not get her words out in the dream properly. And Laura's whisper to Cooper was not uncovered until later, when in a vision of Agent Cooper, he realises she said, "My father killed me," solving the case. I understand if you haven't seen Twin Peaks, this will not make much sense, but how everything ties together so beautifully, how the dream almost acts as a puzzle that slowly makes more and more sense the more you look into it and look around to see what each element links to, is truly thrilling. It is also, in my opinion, the most realistic portrayal of a dream. The sound design, dialogue, setting, lack of control and lack of certainty are all there within this short 4.5-minute scene. However, the Lynch film I really want to discuss in relation to Dream or Nightmare Theory is his 1977 debut feature-length film, Eraserhead. I was writing the script for this video around Halloween, and I decided to give it a try after being recommended it a few times, and obviously being a huge fan of Lynch's work already. Taking 7 years to make, with a budget of around $110,000, the film is essentially a disturbing interpretation of a man's subconscious. It is set in an unknown time period, seeming to be heavily industrial and dystopian, almost taken over by the technology created within this cinematic world. There is hardly ever a break in the nightmarish energy throughout the whole film, with only a single break of tension, when the protagonist, Henry Spencer, smiles and relaxes momentarily at the light appearing under his radiator, which is actually a girl in the radiator that I believe represents death and maybe hope in the idea that the afterlife is kinder than the reality Henry is living in. The man on the moon represents the conception of a child, the scene of Henry's head being taken into a shop, hooked up to a pencil machine that produces rubber ends from his head. It actually came from a David Lynch daydream, and the whole film's writing process and creation came from that dream, hence the name Eraserhead. The film is inherently cryptic in David Lynch style and asks for personal interpretation, exactly like how one would interpret their own dreams that they can't control in most cases. The film itself feels like a nightmare throughout, but it's very hard to determine what is real in that world and what is in the mind of the protagonist. The world is completely devoid of culture, control, nature, and safety. I like to think that the film as a whole kind of weaves between waking life and the unconscious mind, but everything we see in the film appears to be there for a reason. Like the woman across the hall represents lust, the alien baby I felt represented the fear of fatherhood, especially when you don't feel ready, the restrictions, anxiety, and intense responsibility over caring for a child, and the one that scares me the most, childbirth defects. But moving slightly off topic now, I cannot recommend this film enough. The acting is inspired by silent film acting, which you see through Jack Nance's movements and facial expressions, which somehow give off amazing depth to his character and his confusion and anxiety. The visuals, despite being in black and white, are absolutely breathtaking, a truly immersive experience into the mind of David Lynch. The environment is so depressing and terrifying, it allows the film to work, as the environment is the only thing we can use to explain how the characters behave. And last but not least, the audio is truly disturbing. The constant ambient hums of unidentifiable mechanical drones really encapsulates you into this bleak industrial environment. And there's a moment where Henry is walking outside through the wasteland, and he accidentally steps into a puddle, but it makes no sound, which is such an interesting detail where it almost disrupts our perception of reality through
cognitive dissonance.
What the fuck does that mean?
It means you have a hard time accepting what's true because you're too scared of letting go what you thought was.
Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind contains a rather large section of the film in a dream state, a mix between a REM dream and a lucid dream, where Joel can control his movements but only within the confines of the situation and environment he finds himself in. The dream represents the inner turmoil he feels about the decision he made to remove his memories of his greatest love, only due to her doing the same thing to him. As his dream progresses, it highlights the terrible mistake Joel made. He ends up trying to preserve his dreams and going back on his decision, powerfully visualizing the fragility of memories and dreams. Maybe he realized anguish and heartache is a necessary part of life, where memories not only make a person, but also help to improve a person, allowing them to learn from mistakes as well as to make you realize how good you had it.
I want to call it off. Can you hear me? I don't want this anymore. I want to call it off.
Dreams in the real world have provided us with culture, scientific advancements, and better utilization of dreams to help people. The historically rooted method of dream incubation has returned to modern interest, where the ancient cultures we discussed earlier would focus on specific thoughts and problems before sleep, with the intention of seeking guidance and healing through their dreams. Today, however, people use it for creativity, problem-solving, emotional clarity, or personal therapy. Paul McCartney dreamt the melody for the Beatles' hit Yesterday, which is the most covered song of all time. Larry Page had an irrational fear where he had been accepted into Stanford by mistake. This caused an anxiety dream containing an idea of downloading the entire web onto old computers. This led to Larry's decision to first figure out if it was plausible, then spending the next 2 years of his life studying to create what we know today as Google, one of the most revolutionary inventions in modern times. Imagine how different one's life would be if his mind hadn't taken it to that place. And also, the numerous stories and movies that were discovered in the dream state is much larger than I originally thought. Dreams have a way of working their way into all aspects of life, be it our history, our way of life, our industries, and our cognitive function. So if you want to do some soul searching, or look within to cook up that next genius idea, have that dream journal on your bedside and let your dreams come to life. Take care.